You are tuned in to another edition of Americana Music Profiles, brought to you by Americana Rhythm Music Magazine and AmericanaMusicMagazine.com. I'm your host, Greg Tutwiler. Let's jump right in to the next exciting interview. Gary Antol's life spent living in mountain towns in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland give him an authentic perspective to draw on as he leads his band, the Jakobs Ferry Stragglers. Gary is my guest for this edition of Americana Music Profiles. Hi, Gary. Welcome to the podcast.
How you doing?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you on. So we're talking to you in Pennsylvania today. Is that right? That's
correct, yes.
Yeah, cool. So we want to definitely talk about the band, Jakobs Ferry Stragglers, here in a few minutes. But give me a little bit of background about yourself and music and how you got started and your musical journey up to the band.
Well, you know, as I guess cliched as it might sound in a way, like the first music that I remember being really turned on by, I was a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, was Elvis Presley.
Yeah,
you know,
cool.
My mom loved Elvis, and I really loved the early Elvis, the rockabilly stuff.
Yeah,
you know, and kind of a combination of that and my dad having Beatles albums laying around. You know, it got me started on, and my dad played guitar, so it kind of got me started on wanting to play music when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
You know, I started. My dad started teaching me to play guitar, and that just kind of evolved into a thing I did. You know, I got really into. I mean, it was the '80s, so I was kind of as a guitar player and as a kid playing guitar in the mid to late '80s. I was really into all the hair bands.
Sure, yeah.
You know, because they all had no matter how terrible the music was, they all had fantastic guitar players.
Yeah,
you know?
right,
So
right. Yeah.
I spent a few years wanting to be Eddie Van Halen. You know, and then I kind of got into the blues. I got into Stevie Ray Vaughan and all the blues players, which kind of progressed into me taking an interest in some jazz stuff. And I went to college at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. Got a degree in jazz guitar. Following that, I did a few years on various cruise ships and playing amusement park gigs. And yeah, it was a strange way to play music, but a nice way to make a living.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And it was a neat experience because I had to play a lot of music that I wouldn't normally have played.
Okay.
You know, and because it was a job, I had to learn how to do it well. You know, so I got pretty steeped in Motown and 70s funk and disco, because that's mainly what the audience we were playing for wanted to hear.
Okay.
You know, so did a bunch of that. I spent a little bit of time in Las Vegas. I was in the lounge band at the Stardust Casino for about a month and a half.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. I lived in Nashville for a few years. You know, it's funny. I went to Nashville to play music, and I didn't really play much music in Nashville.
Really?
You know, yeah, I did. You know, I did at first, but I actually landed a pretty neat job at B.B. King's Blues Club downtown Nashville, and ended up just working a lot. Okay. You know, about 8 or 9 years ago, I moved home. I guess it's going to be 10 years actually this year that I moved back to Pennsylvania. And I took a gig playing a Telecaster in a pop country band. It was actually a pretty popular band in Western Pennsylvania. It was a nice gig, you know. Again, not necessarily the best music, you know. And then I wrote a song 7 or 8 years ago, and thought when I finished the song, I thought, man, that'd be so great if I could record that song with a banjo player and an upright bass player. I think that would be neat, you know. And literally within a couple of days, I met a banjo player and an upright bass player, and that evolved into the first bluegrass band I ever had, you know. And I really, really just loved it. I don't know, something about it really captured me, you know. And that evolved into the Stragglers. That evolved into this band, you know. And then we've been going at it, coming up on 4 or 5 years now.
So you really didn't grow up hanging around or being groomed to be a string bluegrass player, really. That wasn't your thing.
Not really. It's funny though, because I always really liked it. Again, like growing up, I remember watching like Hee Haw stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I always really liked the music. I didn't really play it so much, but I did really like it. And I had an uncle, my dad's older brother, was nearly 20 years older than my dad. He was 16 years older than my dad. And when I was a kid, I remember him singing all these songs. He was a musician as well. He played the saxophone. But I remember him like all these songs, and when I got into this, this band, I realized that a lot of the songs that he was singing were like Hank Williams songs and John Hartford songs.
Right. Okay.
I didn't know what they were. I was a little boy, but I knew the words to them, like "Hey, good looking," stuff like that. So I kind of always had it as a sort of like a thing in the back. It was kind of a thing that was there. Actually, I remember one in particular. I remember one guitar lesson in college. I studied in school with a man named Joe Negri, who is like a Pittsburgh renowned, even beyond Pittsburgh renowned jazz guitar player.
Okay.
He was the handyman on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Well, it's funny when you said that. I thought, well, that name sounds familiar. So that's cool.
Yeah, he was a cast member of Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, right, sure.
And just a phenomenal guitar player. He's still around. He's like 91, 92 years old, still playing shows every week. He was a truly wonderful, wonderful human being. But I remember in one lesson, he looked at me and he said, you should go to Nashville and you should become a flat picker. And I confess that I was like almost appalled by it at the time because I was studying Miles Davis.
Right. Yeah.
And I asked him why, and he said, "Well, because your swing is never going to be the right way." He said, "You just sound like you grew up on a farm, which like I grew up across the street from a farm, not on the farm, but I did,
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny that when the band started touring and playing, and I started studying guys like, David Greer and Tony Rice and Brian Sutton and all those cats. Like that one comment from Joe, like came back to me. I'm like, it's so funny that, after 20 years later, I'm actually doing what he told me I should do.
Yeah, that's neat.
So
do you still have any connection to him?
I haven't actually seen him since I finished college, which was in 1999.
Okay.
But we actually had, for a while, we had a substitute bass player in the band. His name was Dave Pello, and Dave was like the head of the jazz department at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, and he was Joe's bass player for a long time. So like that's about as close as I've got, playing with him, and that was really neat because Dave was just an amazing bass player, and I used to go watch him play when I was in college, and then like years later, I ended up with him in the band for a couple of months.
That's neat. So you've kind of music's kind of been your source of income as well for most of your life. It sounds like.
For the most part, like a lot of musicians, I've always worked other things.
Right.
Like I've had like factory jobs and construction jobs. I did concrete work for a little while. I've always done whatever I had to do. But for the last few years, I've been pretty lucky that the band's been able to sustain me.
So the band exclusively. So you don't have other music type things on the side that you do in conjunction with.
There are a couple of small recording studios near where I live that record, like, it's funny, they mainly record a lot of hip hop or Christian music, and it couldn't be more polar opposite,
right.
And from time to time, maybe 10, 15 times a year, I do sessions for them.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So like on the hip hop stuff, I kind of do more of a jazz R&B type thing, and then on the Christian songs, I just take an acoustic and I play bluegrass style stuff on it.
Okay.
Under a different name.
Yeah.
I never get credited as me. It's always I have an alter ego. For the studio stuff.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
In your press material, it refers to it says their own brand of high energy Appalachian bluegrass, and if Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, for you, why is that different than Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee? Blue Ridge style bluegrass. Is there a distinction? Am I splitting hairs, or I see that sometimes in different groups, and I just wonder if for you when you perform, is there some sort of difference?
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. I'm sure there is. Most of the hardcore traditionalist bluegrassers, make it a point to tell me that we shouldn't call ourselves a bluegrass band.
Okay.
And I understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of the blend of people in the band lends to like not necessarily doing the music properly.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, it's more of a. We have an old time fiddle player.
Mm-hmm.
Libby Eddy is our fiddle player, and she and I are also the lead vocalists. And she's an old timer, like to the core. She
mm-hmm.
plays old time fiddle.
Right.
And so that's a different feel than like a straight up bluegrass fiddler would be. And then you have me coming from all the background that I came from, and then
right.
kind of like adapting a flat picking style that works, but it's it's not the same as you would expect from a like a well-known flat picker.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's like someone told me once that what they said about my guitar playing was that it sounded like Tony Rice and Charlie Christian, who was a big band player. Just like if they had a baby, it would sound like
okay.
me.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then and then with upright bass, we have a dobro player.
mm-hmm.
And mandolin, and our mandolin player also plays. He's a straight up bluegrass fiddler.
Right. Yeah.
So when you throw that all together, you get something that sounds like something, but doesn't sound anything like it.
Sure.
At the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is actually, to tell you the truth, it's the way I would like for it to be.
Right.
I love traditional bluegrass. Like Bill Monroe, Flat Scruggs, all
right.
that stuff. I love all that stuff. But I don't really think it would be within me to recreate that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mainly because of what you said earlier. Like I did not grow up with that as a major influence on me. So I couldn't like erase the other influences that I've had for that. It just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when I listen to some of your music. Certainly, I wouldn't argue that it's not bluegrass. I definitely appreciate the kind of the distinction. It certainly has all of the elements of bluegrass, but I think you're right too. It has its own identity, which as an artist, I'm sure is what you're striving for, because that way you don't really sound like anybody but yourself, and so everybody, the fans can identify with your music and hear a couple chords and realize, hey, that's the Stragglers, and without having to kind of draw comparisons to other groups.
For sure, it's actually the best way I guess I could describe it is that it wasn't a thing that we or I tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, we've gone through some lineup changes in our time. Mostly because of availability. We play a lot of shows, and sometimes people say, "Oh, I want to go on the road and tour." And then they do it for a year, and they're like, "Man, this is hard. I don't want to do this all the time."
Right. Right.
And which is completely understandable in every way.
Sure.
So we've had two different banjo players and two different full-time bass players. And this year we are doing about half of the shows are just straight up 4-piece guitar, mandolin, fiddle, and bass.
Okay.
And then the other half includes the dobro player.
Mm-hmm.
Really, this lineup is a couple of years ago. If I would have written down my dream lineup of people to play with, this would have been it.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's just all people that I'm friends with, and people we have a really nice chemistry. We're all friends. We get along really well, and we don't really ever, or I don't really ever, like direct anybody on how to play. You know, I just assume that that everybody is like they're here for a reason, and I like their playing. So